Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this really important conversation. My name is Gemma Kelly, and I am Head of Policy and Public Affairs at CEASE, the Centre to End All Sexual Exploitation. Today, we are diving into a really crucial issue at the intersection of social media, pornography, and the growing influence of OnlyFans. This discussion is a follow-on from our recent webinar, OnlyFans, Empowering or Dangerous, where we exposed the truth behind OnlyFans' PR claims, examined the platform's links to child sexual abuse material, human trafficking and coercion, and looked at why real regulation is urgently needed. So today we want to take this conversation further, and we want to look at how OnlyFans operates within a wider ecosystem of social media and pornography platforms, and the serious consequences this has for young people, particularly women and girls. I'm joined by Dr. Elly Hanson, who is a clinical psychologist and researcher specializing in the impact of sexual objectification, pornography, and sexual exploitation. And together, we will explore how platforms like OnlyFans are shaping the next generation's views on sex and relationships, and what action needs to be taken by governments, tech companies, and all of us to stop this proliferation of harm. Dr. Hanson, thank you for being here. Shall we start with OnlyFans itself?
Let's.
Okay, so you and I talk about OnlyFans a lot, and one of the things we talk about is how it promotes itself as a quote-unquote feminist company that provides women with a safe and empowering platform where they can sell sex. Do you agree that this is true?
It's a great question to start with, and I think we could spend our entire conversation on it, couldn't we?
We could.
Let's start with that word empowering. As you say, OnlyFans markets itself as a safe place that is empowering for its content creators, quote unquote. I think there's many ways of approaching this question, some simple, some more complex. To start with the simple ones, empowerment is often linked to financial gain. That's one definition of empowerment, quite a limited one, I'd say. But even if we did accept that, let's have a look at some of the numbers here. The stats suggest that the average OnlyFans content creator, i.e. porn producer, porn performer, on OnlyFans makes about £150 a month. It's a very small amount that we can contrast with the amount that Leonid Radvinsky, the owner of OnlyFans, makes. He is paying himself huge amounts of money from the profits of OnlyFans, which equates to about £1.3 million a day.
A day?
A day.
Okay.
So somebody does seem to be very empowered, but it's not the average person on OnlyFans. Even the people who are making more money on OnlyFans, money is not a good measure of empowerment. You know, what are they empowered to do? But what opportunities are they also precluded from, blocked off from because of their involvement in this work, if we call it work? You know, do we have a situation where we have, say, female bosses of teams who has had a former career in OnlyFans, and it's absolutely fine that the people that she manages are also looking at her OnlyFans account? No, we don't do that, because it just wouldn't work. Actually, there's something inherently undermining. The reveal of sexual content is essentially disempowering for women and men, and blocks them off from other opportunities in life.
So on that, because this is something that we at CEASE talk about a lot, and you and I talk about a lot, is the effects of OnlyFans on what they would call content creators and what the implications are on the person themselves. Because, like we just said, OnlyFans is very good at selling itself as this very safe place. You don't technically have to meet anybody in real life. Therefore, you know, you are protected from some of the violence of maybe in-person prostitution. But we know from various different accounts that this isn't necessarily true, and that actually the toll that being an OnlyFans content creator is actually huge when we look at the psychological and the physical implications. So is that something that you think needs to be spoken about more?
Absolutely. And as you say, it's a really hidden dimension. And it's a hidden toll that somebody may go into doing kind of porn performance on OnlyFans and believe that that's going to be quite circumscribed and boundaried, and they can just do a small amount of content and they can leave it there. But what we know is that for many, a spiral ensues, and what their subscribers were first happy with, they soon become bored of, and putting a lot of pressure on for more extreme content, which the creator has to produce in order to make the money that they initially started with. And it's this kind of gradual erosion of their boundaries. And we've got many OnlyFans performers talking about this. But at the same time, we also have the dynamic of pretense. And this is really important, that you've got an awful lot of people on OnlyFans saying, I love it, I'm making loads of money, it's great, I've just discovered this kind of new route. And how do we respond to that? Well, I'm perfectly happy to accept that that might be some people's reality. I don't need to listen to loggerheads on that. But what we do know is for those for whom that isn't their reality, and it's actually pretty soul destroying and traumatizing, they are still having to pretend that it is their reality. That is the whole point, that to sell sexual services, for you to be successful in that sale, you need to pretend that you're enjoying it and that you have a sexual desire that you don't have. So how do we then disentangle who is genuinely enjoying it, if such a person is out there? I'm not needing to get into a challenge on that, but how do we disentangle them from a huge number who are having to pretend that they are?
Yeah, exactly. And I know also from work that we have done around women who have been involved in prostitution, whether it's online or offline, is that a lot of the time, in order to survive, they have to tell themselves actually that this is an empowered choice. This is something that I want to do. I like doing this. And then it could be many years later before they actually are able to kind of face the reality of, that wasn't the case. And actually I had to lie to myself in order to be able just to cope with the situation I was in.
It's a survival tool, that self-pretense, absolutely. And it goes hand in hand with dissociation. So, when we're in traumatizing situations and fundamentally having to cross over your sexual autonomy, i.e. kind of be in sexual situations where you don't have sexual desire, kind of deeper will for this, you are having to dissociate. It's what many people involved in the sex industry have talked about. What I mean by dissociation is finding a way to cut off from parts of yourself in order to cope. So you might be cutting off from your emotions, you're cutting off from your awareness, cutting off from your body, cutting off from the knowledge that this is abusive and harmful. And what we find is that people often talk about, it's like you say, that journey on, and it's only when it was kind of safe for me to acknowledge the harm in a context where one feels that that will be heard and acknowledged by others, and actually a point in life where I'm valuing myself, that I can face this and go on that journey towards healing.
Yeah, and I imagine this is something that you have seen a lot in your work, right? Various victims of sexual abuse and exploitation, and just how long that journey is and how difficult it is for people.
Yes, so one of the focuses in my work has been around adolescent sexual exploitation. So young people who have been groomed and then may be involved in the sale of sex. We wouldn't call it sex, we'd call it rape.
Yeah.
But and we as a society used to write all of that off as a lifestyle choice, but society has kind of caught up with the psychological dynamics at play. Absolutely recognise that. So when you've got a 15-year-old going out and, just to say it simply, selling sex, we see that to be exploitation and we see the harms and dynamics involved. And yet when somebody steps over their 18th birthday and they join OnlyFans, you call it freedom and empowerment, and it's just a complete nonsense. And it's a way for us as a society to turn away from this huge swathe of human suffering that these platforms are fueling and profiting from.
Yeah, and so do you think that OnlyFans is aware of that? Like, do you think that they are willingly profiting from the fact that actually society is just so willing to turn away from this and kind of think that it is empowering and it is, a choice, etc.? Do you think that they've kind of seen that and gone, well, this is a great opportunity now for us to make some money?
I mean, it's possible to know exactly what goes on in people's minds. I wouldn't want to speculate, but we know that certainly there have been numerous revelations of abuse, very explicit abuse on OnlyFans, which they don't seem to be very concerned about. So I suppose the most likely scenario here is these are inconvenient truths that they have turned away from in the service of lining their own pockets.
Yeah, which they're clearly doing in huge quantities. What was the statistic again? What does the owner pay himself every day?
It's $1.3 million a day. I said pounds, but I think it's actually dollars. Yes.
It's a lot of money.
And that is never talked about.
No.
There's a societal discussion of OnlyFans. People are not talking about the money and how some very small number of people are getting very, very wealthy here on the backs of many people who are not.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that really worries me, and I know that you and I have spoken about this as well, is that the young women who are being pulled into OnlyFans are being pulled in at younger and younger ages. So you and I talk about the TikTok OnlyFans pipeline, and I know that was something we wanted to go back to after the webinar that we had a couple of weeks ago. Can you tell us a little bit, because I am only at the beginnings of trying to understand where TikTok fits into all of this horrible ecosystem. So can you explain to us a little bit what that looks like, where TikTok fits in all of this, and how it's pushing young girls towards OnlyFans?
Yes, really important focus for us, that we cannot understand OnlyFans without placing it in this wider tech ecosystem. Because what you've got these platforms working in what I describe as parasitic symbiosis. So that they're helping each other behave as parasites on us humans, is how I would see it. So if you are on OnlyFans, and I've just used the word content creator, it's not a great one, but it'll do for the moment.
Yeah.
There are very limited opportunities for you to kind of build your subscribers, for you to advertise yourself to people wanting to buy your sexual services. So the way in which people build their subscriber base, their clients, is via social media. That has meant that social media is now awash with this content, because unlike, say, you or I posting something on social media, we don't have a financial incentive for that. Yeah. But OnlyFans content creators absolutely do. Yeah. So they're having to push out content to attract people, whether it be on Instagram, on TikTok, on X, and that then drives people to their OnlyFans account. And this is actually really part of the OnlyFans business model in a more subtle way, that what OnlyFans is kind of offering people is advertising, is a sense that, you know, you can have this sexual experience with somebody that you have actually got to know personally online. Yes. And that's how it's setting itself apart from the kind of free porn sites.
Yes.
So people feel like they've got to know this influencer, but actually now I can go and see her in a sexual situation. And it's, you know, that's a particular titillation there that is being harnessed and monetized. But what is then happening is that these content creators are building this kind of influencer persona, and they're getting a huge number of followers, not just the males who are wanting to buy, but also girls who are being sold by the content creators this version of sex work that is very glamorous, that is bringing in thousands of pounds, and that is a great lifestyle. Now, as we've just talked about, we understand why those content creators are doing that. That is key to their business model. And many of them are dissociating from the dark side of what they're doing. So I'm not saying this to blame the content creators.
Yeah, of course.
It's part of that whole spiral and dynamic. But what it does mean is that girls are on the receiving end, as are boys, of a huge amount of social media content that is glamorizing and normalizing sex work. And so many of them will then think, oh, okay, once I turn 18, this is very much a thing. You know, once you turn 18, you can go into that. And we've got Bonnie Blue, I think just last week, saying that she's on the hunt for girls who have literally just turned 18 to do sex acts with for her OnlyFans account.
Really? Right.
Yes. And her reason is apparently they taste sweet. Sorry for that explicit comment, but we need to be real about what we're talking about here.
Well, yes, you're right. We do, because this is what our 13, 14, 15-year-old girls are looking at on TikTok, and younger, because we know that while you do have to be technically 13 to have a TikTok account, there's plenty of children on TikTok that are under 13.
Absolutely. I was just talking to a youth worker the other day who was telling me that she helped a girl, a 13-year-old, so she was the right age for TikTok. TikTok says it's appropriate for that age, open a TikTok account, and within a very, very short time, she is receiving these posts. So these posts are not coming through to people who've searched them out. The algorithm, there's so much of this content that it is being just bombarded to people, whether or not they have shown an interest in this, and then they get broken in to the kind of sexual scripts, to the messages that they are being sold.
Yeah. Yes. It's just grooming on a mass scale, essentially.
And it's grooming girls and boys in different ways. So girls are being groomed to think of sex as something they sell.
Yeah.
Boys are groomed to think of something they buy.
Yeah.
And when you buy and you sell, OnlyFans is the winner because they take a cut. So, you could actually argue that OnlyFans' ideal world is a dystopia where all sexual encounters are transactions that they take a cut from.
Yes. And their cut is 20%?
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So they're clearly making a lot of money if their owner is paying himself over $1 million a day, as opposed to the women and girls who are making £150 a month.
They're making obscene sums of money. And also we need to look at, if we did a pie chart of that money, how much of that is direct profit. Here we're talking about this kind of grey zone where people are pulled into sex work for various reasons and find themselves often caught in spirals of dissociation. I can also talk about traumatic reenactment and sex as self-harm. All of these dynamics are at play. But even if we took out all of that, we've also got a problem on OnlyFans with very overt sexual abuse, trafficking, rape, exploitation. And OnlyFans is taking a 20% cut of all of that.
Yes.
So this is outrageous. And when an individual profits from the sexual sale of another, we call that pimping.
Yeah.
And yet with OnlyFans, we call it a safe social media company empowering and caring about its creators. It's just this complete doublethink.
Yes, it really is. It's hard to get your head around it. Like when you lay it out in the black and white way that you just did, it's kind of mind-boggling to think that a lot of the time with OnlyFans, we kind of just shrug our shoulders and go, yeah. I mean, societally, we joke about OnlyFans. Oh, you're running low on money? Set up an OnlyFans account. And yet there is some very serious crimes taking place on this platform. And we know that from various different articles that Reuters have done and others, and some really good investigatory journalism. And yet they still continue to profit from human trafficking, sexual exploitation. It's quite mind-blowing.
Really, really is. And I wonder whether that observation, Gemma, is part of why they seem to have got a free pass, more or less, thus far, because actually it's so big. The problem is so big. Industrial profiting from sexual trauma on this scale, if we faced it, then there are huge implications for us in terms of regulation and how we change society. And I think people are getting a kind of fatigue around facing a further social problem. And it's easier to say, look, I don't have to face that one, it's too big, I just want to believe what OnlyFans are saying about themselves, because I don't have to face it. I don't have to do it.
Yes, it's true. It's the same with the porn industry. It's easier not to think about it, and it's easier just not to really examine what it is, what it's doing, the harm it causes. There's been a lot in the media around this adolescent show, and Bonnie Blue started, there's conversations are sort of happening now a little bit more than maybe they were before. Do you think this is a good time for people to start trying to get to grips with OnlyFans, with the porn industry in general? Or do you think this will blow over and we'll be on to something new next week?
Well, what is encouraging is that the kind of furore around the drama of adolescence, I think for me shows that it feels like a dam has burst forth, that people have been actually wanting to talk about what our young people are being bombarded with online, and what is going on. And that has provided a kind of vehicle for those conversations. So yes, I do think it's an opportunity. I'm keen that we don't enter into kind of knee-jerk reactions. To be honest, I was quite frustrated, to say the least, to see that Keir Starmer his takeaway is for young people to be shown this in schools, versus during the same week that him and his team are considering axing a very tiny tax on big tech. The take-home from exposés of online harms is to regulate big tech, rather than pushing this onto children as a problem that they need to solve. This is not a problem. They do not need to get better at navigating sophisticated algorithms that use a huge amount of manpower to manipulate them. Actually, what needs to happen is that we need to stop that business model. And I'm frustrated because Online Safety Act could have been implemented in a way that does this, but thus far we don't have a huge amount of optimism that Ofcom are taking that robust approach.
Yes, potentially an understatement. No optimism, but we will plough on and hope that we can encourage them to do so. But you're right, we have missed a golden opportunity. And when we were working on the Online Safety Act, we regularly would talk about how this was a once in a generation piece of legislation. And it was and is a once in a generation piece of legislation, but legislation will only ever be as good as its implementation. And I think this is where we are falling down, and that we are giving a free pass to big tech. And that's not good enough.
And how much of that is because big tech are lobbying and exerting all kinds of influence, and there's fear in government rather than courage and acting as the representatives that they should be of the people, particularly the most vulnerable in society.
Yes, exactly. And it's like what you said, it's the onus is being pushed back onto children. And our duty as the government's duty is to protect children. They are the most vulnerable, one of the most vulnerable sectors of our society. They should be protected. And equally, it's also not fair to push the burden onto parents, because as a parent, I can only imagine how difficult it is trying to manage all of the different tech platforms that their kids are on. They don't understand the harms. They don't know how the algorithms work. This isn't a parents and children problem or a teacher's problem. This is a government problem, and they need to fix it. There was no question there. That was just a...
I am just cheerleading you from the sidelines there, Gemma. I couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely. And the continual deferring of the problem to children and parents is cowardly.
Yeah.
And completely ineffective.
Yes, exactly. Because there are many parents, as we well know, who want to protect their children from these things, but it's not within their power to do that. This is a world beyond what they have control over. The only people who can control this are the tech industry. And the only people who can control the tech industry should be governments.
Absolutely. And right now, without a ban on the parasitic business model, social media just isn't safe for children. But the thing is, it's also not safe for adults. So I am now in a place where I am supportive of a ban of social media for under 16s. But I wish I wasn't. I wish I didn't have to be. My first ask would be ban the business model so that they're not in the headlights of this manipulation. But if you're not going to stop manipulating them, then sorry, it isn't safe. But that still leaves adults and 16 plus. That's not even all adults. So that's also children as well. And we often forget about young adults in the mix here.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because we do forget about adults, and we shouldn't, because the harms are just as real for adults as they are for children. And, particularly with OnlyFans, because it not only targets children, but it targets adults, particularly adults who are vulnerable, who are looking to make some extra money. They're fed this line about how this is so safe. How do you think we should try to address that issue? How can we protect particularly the young women who are being just bombarded with OnlyFans being the answer to all of their money problems?
I think that there's a few steps that we could take policy-wise. One, ban the normalisation or glorification of sex work online. So I don't think this should be controversial. It shouldn't be legal to promote sex work to your viewers. If somebody intentionally looks for it, that might be arguable, that's different. But people should be protected from those messages when they go online. So that would be a first step. And secondly, I also think that we should raise the age at which it is legal for a company to profit from somebody selling sex. The onus there, when I say legal, it will become illegal for the company, not the person themselves, to profit from somebody under the age of, say, 23 or 25 from selling sex on their platform. And that would just build in a bit of a buffer protection.
Yeah.
And this is something that people who have been on OnlyFans themselves are arguing for. This has got support from various quarters in recognition of the continued vulnerability of young adults that doesn't just suddenly disappear when they turn 18.
Yes. So people who've even been on OnlyFans are saying at least 23 or somewhere between 23 and 25. And yet what we have is OnlyFans being promoted to 13-year-olds. via TikTok. Yeah.
Exactly. Furthermore, we also have OnlyFans recommend a friend scheme whereby girls are encouraged to effectively pimp their friends, persuade them into it so that they get their own 20% cut. And we just see the kind of domino effect here, and more girls and boys being caught by these OnlyFans tentacles and drawn into that web.
Yes, I had momentarily forgotten about the refer a friend situation. Yes, and you do see that is so clear on OnlyFans as well, is that there are so many accounts that are purely set up just to recommend other content creators, because obviously then that person is going to get the 20% of however much money that other person makes. Yeah, it is online pimping. Oh, I could talk to you for hours about this. But in the last couple of minutes, is there anything we have missed that you think is worth us having a quick chat or thinking about?
I think we've covered some really cool points. And maybe if I had to just choose one other thing, it would be that we really don't have a light on how OnlyFans is shifting romantic relationships. And again, I'm not necessarily focusing on children here, but more kind of young people and people across the life course. Because what's happening is that it's becoming normalized that men usually will subscribe to people on OnlyFans. And how are women then experiencing that if they are having a romantic relationship with men subscribing?
Yes.
Because what we can imagine, and I certainly know anecdotally of a number of situations, but just as a psychologist or as a human being, what we can imagine is that that's actually very difficult.
Yes.
That my partner, who is meant to have a sexual relationship with me, has paying money to see another woman and is then chatting to that woman sexually, because we haven't really talked about the chatting dynamic of OnlyFans. So, it's a kind of form of unfaithfulness, and yet we're not being sold it like that.
Yes.
And when the CEO of OnlyFans, Keely Blair, was asked about that dynamic, she just kind of totally batted it away and said, well, you can't generalize. And actually, I know a lot of couples that together subscribe. Well, as Melinda Tankard-Rice, I have quoted her before on this, expressing emotional and physical pain is becoming the new taboo because it transgresses the porn script of a continually up for it girl who takes it all with a smile. And this is exactly it, that if women are dissenting, then they are framed as not sex positive, not in touch with their sexual freedom. And the female sexuality that is performed, i.e. an unreal female sexuality, that is a deception and is a performance for money, becomes what female sexuality is expected to be. And that is incredibly hollow for everybody involved, for the women and for the men. Sex becomes this kind of scene where the woman performs for male gratification, and kind of true connection, chemistry, intimacy, it is lost in the process.
Yes, and we don't have time to go into this, but that is also something that we don't get to talk about as much, which is what we lose as well from that point of view. So oftentimes when we want to raise concerns around the pornography industry or OnlyFans, some of the pushback we get is, well, you were just anti-sex. And our argument back is, no, actually, we are the opposite of anti-sex. But what we promote is not sex as a commodity. That's not what sex should be. But that is a whole other topic.
The modification of sex and how it hollows out true, ethical, deeply satisfying sexuality.
Yes.
Should capitalism be able to exploit the most intimate parts of ourselves? My straight answer would be no. But as you say, it's a whole other podcast, isn't it?
It is a whole other podcast. But yeah, not a terrible place to end on, and something for people who are watching this to mull over, to have a think about. Please come back to us with questions. Anybody who does watch this, we'd love to hear from you. We can pass on any questions to Elly. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching this, Elly. Thank you so much. As always, you are wonderful. You are doing amazing work, and keep it up. We are with you and we support you.
As are you, Gemma, and the whole of CEAS, and it's a real privilege and delight to work with you. So thank you.
Thank you.